Chief Rabbi, a central theme of future tense is one you've pursued throughout your career. The Jews are not alone in the world. Despite the fact of numerous external challenges to the Jewish people in Israel and the diaspora, you argue that, quote, today, Jews are not victims, not powerless, and do not stand alone, unquote. And you add that to think in such terms is counterproductive and dysfunctional. Now, the devil's advocate argument, of course, which I'm sure you know, would be to assert that given the rise of anti-Semitism in many quarters and the demonization and delegitimization of Israel inside the UN and without, that Jews have every reason to feel that they're fighting a lonely battle in the modern world. Could you please explain to our audience why Jews should, in your words, take a stand not motivated by fear, not driven by paranoia or a sense of victimhood, but a positive stand on the basis of Jewish values?
Look, the answer is very simple. Okay, so some people don't like us very much. Now, 90%, forgive me, that's their problem. Bad things happen, so some of it is our problem. But the question is, how do we respond? And let me be very blunt with you, Elliot. There is a horrendous thing that happened. None of us, none of us should pass judgment on European Jewry in the 19th century. But European Jewry in the 19th century made a horrendous mistake, which all of us would have made, I think, in the same circumstances. They said this: non-Jews don't like us very much. You know, the 19th century was a horrific moment for European Jewry, because on the one hand, all the rhetoric was enlightenment, emancipation, Jews are going to have equal rights, you're the same as us. But that same century of emancipation was the century that saw the birth of racial anti-Semitism. And already by 1862, Moses Hess could see this. And Jews internalized this anti-Semitism. And they said, why do Gentiles hate us? Must be because we're different. So therefore, let's stop being different and they won't hate us anymore. And so they don't like us because we don't eat in their homes, we'll give up kashrus. They don't like us because we pray in a strange language, we'll pray in English, etc., etc., etc. And they took every move to divest themselves of everything that made Jews different. Did that reduce anti-Semitism by 1 millimeter? Not by one. And I don't know if you've read, has it come out here in Canada, a very moving book by somebody called Edmund de Waal called The Hare with Amber Eyes. Has it come out? And it tells the story of a remarkable Jewish family that I didn't know about, the Ephrussi family, about Charles Ephrussi, this great aesthete, Jewish banking family, like almost second only to the Rothschilds in the 19th century, about Charles Ephrussi in Paris, about Victor Ephrussi in Vienna. These were people at the very peak of society. And yet, like that, in 1938, the Anschluss, and before that in Paris, when Louis Drouin wrote that book, La France Juive, which was a virulently anti-Semitic book in the 1880s that became a bestseller in France and remained a bestseller. There were 200 editions of that book produced between the 1880s and 1945. And then Vienna and the Anschluss, all of that attempt to be like everyone else. Jews cannot cure anti-Semitism. The victim cannot cure the crime. The hated cannot cure the hate. Who are the only people who can cure anti-Semitism? The people who lead the cultures that give rise to anti-Semitism. And therefore, we need friends and allies. And that is why the work of the people in London in organizing that conference and the wonderful work that Owen does here in Canada. England and Canada became the first two countries where the fight against anti-Semitism was led by non-Jews. And we owe those non-Jews a tremendous debt. And what happens when you go out to make friends? I was very touched by your reference to the book A Letter in the Stroll. You know that book is not called A Letter in the Scroll. In England, it's called Radical Then, Radical Now. It was then translated into Ivrit. And I have two brothers who made Aliyah, and it's called, Radikalit Azra. And my brother, who's a big mischief, whom you know, I think, said, Jonathan, your book has just come out in Israel. It's called Ridiculous Then, Ridiculous Now. In England, it was called Radical Then, Radical Now, because in England my books are read by non-Jews. And I want you to understand this. That book was serialized in the Times. Now, this is a book about Jewish pride. And I said to the editor, the deputy editor of the Times, Jews are less than 1/2 of 1% of the population. The readership of the Times is 99.5% non-Jews. I said to the deputy editor of the Times, Michael Gove, why are you publishing this? This is about Jewish identity. He said, there's non-Jew, because you're our chief rabbi. Now go figure this. This is 2000. Today, 11 years later, Michael Gove is no longer the deputy editor of the Times. He entered Parliament and is today Secretary of State for Education, and will get up in any gathering, Jewish or non-Jewish, and tell a non-Jewish public, number one, you want something to admire? Jewish day schools. And then he will go on and say, you want something else to admire? The State of Israel. Now here is a non-Jew who has become the biggest single defender of the State of Israel in the current government and the biggest single supporter of Jewish education. In 2002, May 2002, you remember what May 2002 was? We had the suicide bombing at its height, that horrendous bombing at the Park Hotel Netanya, Erev Pesach. Then Jenin, the reply. It was a horrifically tense moment between Jews and Muslims in Britain. May 2002, the Queen, Her Majesty, I should stand when I say that, but you take the point, gave a little reception for Kol Ma'aminim Shehul Faiths in Britain, in Buckingham Palace, and towards the end I am approached by a very Haredi Muslim who comes up to me and says, Chief Rabbi, you're the Chief Rabbi, aren't you? I said, yes. He said, my wife wants a word with you. And she comes towards me with a big hijab, and I'm dreading what she's going to say. And she comes up to me and says, Chief Rabbi, I just want to thank you for Radical Then, Radical Now, for Letter in the Scroll. Go figure. You stand up for your faith. Other people respect you for that. You see yourself as a victim, other people will see you as a victim. You have to do the opposite thing. 1 month earlier, in April 2002, the Union of Jewish Students came to me saying, there's a lot of anti-Israel and anti-Jewish sentiment on campus. And I sat down with the Union of Jewish Students and I said, you are going to do the unexpected thing. They call this in psychotherapy paradoxical intervention. Your response to anti-Semitism on campus is that you are going to lead the fight against Islamophobia. Tishma. Out of that initiative came an organization which is very prominent today in Britain called the Coexistence Trust, Jews and Muslims fighting anti-Semitism and Islamophobia together. And that is now a group that has tremendous presence in the Houses of Parliament and in British political life and is a model for all other communities. You want to fight anti-Semitism? The simplest account I can give when anyone asks me is the profound words of one of the greatest Jewish mystics of all time, Nachman of Bratslav, which is so simple that we teach them as a song to our 5-year-old children, Kol ha'olam kulo geshet tzama'od. Life isn't easy. It's full of dangers. Va'ika Shelo Lafachet Klal. The main thing is never to be afraid. If you walk tall, if you have absolute confidence, you go out to make friends, you win those friends. And with friends like those, we will fight anti-Semitism and we will win.